Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to talk about Dunder methods in Python, or special methods or magic methods, whatever you want to call them. So what happens when you try to print 2 plus 4? Well, this is obviously going to output 6, right? Because 2 plus 4 is 6. But how does a program know that when you use a plus sign, it's supposed to add these numbers together? Well, that's because this plus sign is actually calling a special method in the background called the Dunder add method. And this is being called on the class int with the arguments 2 and 4. So let me print this to show you that this is completely equivalent to the previous print statement that I put in here. So both of these are going to output 6, as you can see, and that's because this plus sign, what it's doing in the background is actually calling this method. So it's calling the add Dunder method on the integer class with the arguments 2 and 4. And obviously this behavior is different for strings. So if I write a string in here and I put like m and n, and I run this, you can see that this just concatenates the strings m and n together, because that's what happens when you use a plus sign on strings. Now, when you create classes of your own, this functionality is not implemented. And what I mean by this is that when you use a plus sign to try to add objects of that class together, the computer isn't going to know what to do, because it isn't like the integer and the string for which the plus sign is already implemented. It's already built into those classes. So the computer knows what to do when you use a plus sign on integers and strings, because that's a built-in functionality of those classes. So let me just create a class really quickly to illustrate this. And I'm going to pass. And let me just create 2 instances of this class. So S1 and then S2 is going to equal student. And now let me try to print S1 plus S2. So now if I run this, you can see that this is going to say unsupported operand type for plus sign. So basically this means that the program doesn't know what to do when you use a plus sign with objects of the class students. And that's because I haven't defined that functionality inside of my class. So in case I wanted to do that, I'd write def and then double underscore add double underscore self, and then let's just pass. So basically what I do in here is I would define what happens when I use a plus sign on objects of my class, okay? Because this is the add Dunder method, which is not implemented into my class, so I'd have to define it, okay? So that's how Dunder methods work. Now, there is a Dunder method that you're probably familiar with, which is the init method. So double underscore init, double underscore, and this allows me to put parameters in here. So for example, name and age. Now let me say self.name equals name, and self.age equals age. And Dunder methods are called automatically every time you create an instance of your class, meaning you don't have to call them. You wouldn't have to write, for example, s1.init. You wouldn't have to do this. This is already done for you in the background every time you create an instance. And basically what the init Dunder method allows you to do is it allows you to choose a name and an age for each instance of your class that you create, and whatever parameter you put in here. And then the name that you pass as an argument is going to equal self.name, so the name of that instance. So I'm going to define a name Mike for my first instance. He's going to be 34. My second instance is going to be called Mary. She's going to be 45. But now we still have a slight problem, which is when we try to print either of these objects, this is just going to give me a student's object at a certain memory location. Now, when you try to print, for example, an integer, so print 2, this is just going to print 2. It isn't going to print an integer object at a certain memory location. That's because the integer class has a method inside, a built-in method that says, okay, when you try to print an integer, you're going to return that integer instead of this memory location. Now, we don't have that for our class. We have to define that manually. So we have to tell the program what to do when you try to print an object. And there's a method which is called, there's a Dunder method which is called the repr method. and rep stands for representation. So this allows me to create a string representation of my object. So I'm going to return an f string, which is going to say self.name, comma, age, self.age. Oops, self.age, like so. And now, no, not like that. Sorry, this is in between the brackets. Okay, so now if I run this, you can see that instead of this ugly memory location, which isn't very useful at all, it's going to say Mike age 34, which is, well, a lot prettier. Okay, so these two methods are more so to kind of define your object and represent it. Now, you can actually perform operations on your objects if you define that functionality inside of your class. So, for example, the Dunder mul method defines what happens when you multiply, when you use the asterisk operand on objects of the class student. So I'm going to write self, and I'm also going to write num, and then I'm going to write self dot name is going to equal self dot name times num. So this basically defines what happens when I use this asterisk here. And I'm going to write s1 times 4, so my object times 4, then I'm going to print s1, and now if I run this, you can see that this is going to print Mike, age 35. So it's going to print Mike 4 times, s1 dot times 4, which is what this mul method does, right? It multiplies the name of my object by the number that I defined to be 4 in here. So the last method I'm going to show you is kind of something that you probably won't be using so often, but I decided to show you because it is really weird but really interesting at the same time. So you can actually call your objects as if they were functions. So you can write s1 parenthesis and then maybe some kind of argument inside of here. And you can do this by using the Dunder call method. And let me pass in self and a number as parameters, and I just want to return that number. And now what I can do is I can print s1 and then call it as if it was a function on the number, for example, 7. And now if I run this, you can see that this is going to print 7, which is the number I put in here. So that's really weird. It's really interesting as well. Now, if you want to check out some more Dunder methods that you can use, you can explore the official Python documentation. There are a bunch of Dunder methods and a bunch of useful Dunder methods. These are the ones that I decided to show you just because probably init and repr are the ones that you're going to use the most. And then mul and call are just interesting, and add as well. They're very interesting, so I decided to show it to you. And that's basically it for this video. Now, as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you so much for watching. If this video was valuable to you, if you learned something in this video, please like and subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.